We're also following a developing story also in India where a so-called man-eating tiger has sparked major controversy. The animal is being blamed for at least 13 deaths in the central part of the country, including 5 in recent months. We've also learned India's Supreme Court rejected an appeal that would have stopped forest rangers from killing the tiger.
India's growing towns and urban areas have triggered more run-ins between humans and tigers. The situation has exposed social and political issues facing the country today. So for more on this, we want to bring in CBSN contributor Alex Clemente. He writes for Signal, a newsletter produced by GZERO Media. Hey, Alex. So we have a man-eating tiger. Sort of lay out this timeline for this story for us and why they can't seem to capture this tiger.
Well, so as you said, this tiger has stalked and eaten more than a dozen people in a town in central India over the past 2 years. And one of the reasons that tigers are coming into more contact with human beings and these events are actually increasing, there's actually a political story behind this, right? Which is that the BJP, the party that runs India, is a party with a strong kind of Hindu nationalist politics. And one of the issues that's very important to their most hardcore supporters is protecting cows from slaughter, right? For many devout Hindus, cows enjoy a nearly sacred status, right? And one of the problems that that's causing is that it's leading to an overpopulation of cows, right? India has a huge milk industry. Once cows are no longer producing milk, generally what milk farmers do is they kill the cows or sell them to leather and leather makers and butchers. Because they can't do that, there's this huge population of underfed, mangy cows wandering around, which draws tigers out of the forest to have a bite, where they come into closer contact with human beings. There's another part of the story, though, which is that the tiger conservation efforts have actually gone extraordinarily well over the past 20 years, but the habitats that the tigers live in are being reduced by overdevelopment and economic deregulation, which is another key plank of the BJP platform, which is trying to grow India's economy. So it's this confluence of religious politics, economic development, and tigers.
It's a real pickle because on one hand, the expansion and the growth, the explosion of population in urban centers and across India means that the economy is doing better, that people are sort of at some level rising up out of poverty, which has led to more people in these areas, which is encroaching on the natural habitat, the natural territory of tigers, which is a bad thing because they're killing people. So the question, of course, becomes, how do you manage that situation? Do they have a path forward?
Well, I mean, the government poses this as essentially a conflict or a tension between economic development and environmental preservation, and we've seen this elsewhere. Environmentalists say, look, that's a false dichotomy. Actually, the real problem is that there's too much red tape, there's too much corruption. That's the reason why you can't get development projects done. It's not that there's environmental overregulation. But the fact remains that there are these several dozen tiger habitats that are now too small for a growing tiger population and are actually being reduced and cut off from each other by new infrastructure projects, by new construction projects, and so on. And you see the result.
You know, the one thing that I think about is there was a point in time a few years ago where tigers were in danger, and they still are. But the fact that there is a growing population, and you just pointed out that these preservation centers have become successful, that's sort of good news, right? Because you don't want to imagine a world where your children or grandchildren will never see a tiger in real life. But you got to protect.
But not in your living room or wherever this one particular tiger is showing up. So apparently the government's compensating victims, tiger victims, and that's a part of the controversy?
So the government has been offering up to $14,000 to the families of each person who's been killed by the tiger, which has led to this incredibly grim situation, which is reported in the story over the weekend, that people are going to the tiger bait stations in the forest and trying to get eaten so that the money will go to their families.
Well, clearly,
or bitten, right? I would hope not.
But I mean, we talk about, you know, that this is an indication that people are rising out of poverty, but there's a lot of urban poverty too.
And it's really a story about rural poverty. I mean, you still have more than 200 million people who live below the poverty line in India. Rural poverty is still a huge issue. So in this sort of crazy story about tigers and people, you actually see that there's a real, you know, there's a kind of deeper economic story here.
And we're going to highlight hard numbers, but that's a hard number right there. 200. Just let that sink in. 200 million people,
more than 200
living, below the poverty line, which is $1.90 a day, right? That's significant and something that, you know, we should continue to talk about.